Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is John Liljelund. He is the Secretary General of the International Floorball Federation, a role he has held since 2005. With previous experiences from the Finnish Floorball Federation, he has over 25 years of experience from sports management and floorball at the highest level. John and I were talking about how floorball will grow internationally, the upcoming difficulties surrounding the World Cup in December 2020, and he also shares a story of how he, in his first game as a floorball goalie, played against the Finnish national team. John Liljelund, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you very much.
You are the Secretary General at IFF, the International Floorball Federation. Could you tell us what this role includes?
Well, my job is in principle I'm in charge of the operational activities of the IFF, which includes the fact that I'm leading the office. I take care of the contacts to the international federations IFF is a member of, to the member federations, to the different committees. And then I have certain tasks. I'm responsible for the material part of IFF, as well as also I'm handling the TV. And then, of course, the everyday running of the office. That is in short.
And your career dates back even further than just the IFF. In 1993, you started working for the Finnish Floorball Federation.
Yeah, actually, I started the first task within floorball was I was responsible for the club from 88. Or something. But in 93, I joined the Finnish Floorball Federation Central Board. I had been active in university student organizations and other youth and sports organizations before, and I was then asked if I could come and help. I actually helped out the Finnish Federation already in a little bit more problematic situation between a club and the federation for the General Assembly in 1992.
So what were your responsibilities within the Finnish Floorball Federation?
In the beginning, I was a member of the board. Then I was running the competition committee for a while. I was the head of operations for the first actual ever played championships in floorball, the European Floorball Championships in 1994 in Helsinki, running that. And then also in 1994, I was elected as a member of the International Floorball Federation Central Board. So I was taking care of international tasks as well. But in principle, I've done almost everything possible in the Finnish federations during the time of 93 to 2005.
And in 2005, you took this experience and you became a part of the IFF.
Yeah, that was a quite interesting process as the Finnish federation started after IFF made its first strategy in 2001. The Finnish federation started feeling that we would need to speed up the process and the development of the International Floorball Federation. Until that, the IFF had mainly been organizer of events. And then as a part of that, the Finnish Federation then agreed with IFF to move the IFF office to Helsinki. And I was a part of that process. And then in the end of the process, the Finnish Floorball Federation president at that time, Matti Ahde, then told me that you would be good as a candidate for the Secretary Generalship. So that was what happened there.
Have you had any other positions within the IFF before Secretary General?
So I was a member of the board from 94, and I was treasurer from 94 to 98. From 98 to 2005, I was vice president.
And now you're Secretary General at the top?
Yes, now I'm Secretary General, of course, so responsible for the operational activities.
Looking ahead to December 2020, the World Cup will hopefully take place in Finland in December.
Yes, it will.
How is the planning process going with regards to the difficulties of the coronavirus?
Okay, so basically from the start, when the first restrictions came around for the COVID-19 pandemic, the IFF has been building a protocol of security for the participating teams, the audience, the organizers, everybody surrounding the event. And based on those protocols, we have been preparing for the event in the likelihood that we would be able to run it. At one point, it looked really good during the summer, but now, of course, as the pandemic has started to roll out the second wave and travel restrictions are coming harder, it will be much, much more difficult to do it. And of course, it's also for the local organizer, the present gathering restrictions are probably going to prohibit the possibility of actually being able to run the event as planned. But I mean, for me, it's like ordinary. I've been working with TV. I've been making TV deals with the TV companies and then cooperating closely with the local organizer in planning different things, or starting from venue advertisements and ending up in what time which things will happen.
With the current travel restrictions, is it possible to bring all countries to the World Cup this year?
At the moment, with the present travel restrictions given by the Finnish government, there are only 4 teams who can actually participate today without any quarantine, and that would be Latvia, Slovakia, Thailand and Finland. And the other countries would then have, with the present situation, to be in a 14-day quarantine, which of course means that it's a huge problem when you can't practice during those 14 days of quarantine, and the fact that it will cost a lot. There's been some discussions about trying to find a bubble, but I think it's, to be very honest, it's a bit too late to start that process. And the other thing, and of course then at the moment, you can only fill about 1/3 at the maximum of the spectator capacity, and that of course will affect quite heavily on the local organizer's budget.
Of course. To clarify, this is the Men's World Cup that will take place in December. The Junior World Cup should have taken place in the spring, right?
It was supposed to be played in Uppsala in the beginning of May. It was first moved to September. And now, due to the fact that the situation hasn't changed favorably, now it's moved to the second week of May next year. So we will play the men's U19 World Championships 2021 in the weekend during 1st of May. And then the next weekend, the 5 days, we will play the women's in Uppsala. The men's will be played in Czech Republic in Brno, and the women's in Uppsala.
Then we have something to look forward to. If we talk about floorball as a sport, it's a fast sport, very entertaining to watch. Why do you think that it's mostly famous in the northern European countries and it hasn't really gotten a large international spread?
Well, I mean, there are, of course, major issues. The countries where floorball has had an easy adoption in the first stage are, of course, all countries where ice hockey is pretty strong. So there has already been a culture in stick sports, so playing with a stick and ball on the floor or the ice. I would say that at the moment floorball is pretty vastly spread out also in Slovakia and partly also Poland, etc. And it's really growing in countries like Singapore and also Thailand. But the reason probably is that there was venues available, and at that time there was a change in the mid-80s in how sport was perceived. It was okay not to be so good but still want to play, which then gave a possibility for floorball to develop. And in Finland and Sweden, it was really, really a miraculous change of fact that the sports grew to become one of the top 3 most played sports in the countries quite quickly. Then there was a lot of other sports who came but didn't succeed. Like there was rink bandy in the Nordics, if you might know or remember. In the 80s was really big. And for example, it's interesting to know that both rink bandy and bandy said no thank you to floorball in Finland and Sweden, that we don't want you to be, because floorball wanted to join through them first and then had to form own organizations only afterwards. It's quite interesting that floorball has developed very quickly now in Denmark and Norway, but that has been during the last about 5 years. And there is also other proofs, but there was venues, there was a change in the atmosphere of how sport was perceived. And one big reason in Finland and Sweden was, of course, the recession in beginning of the 90s, where floorball was inexpensive. And in Finland, a very good example was that floorball wasn't played in sports halls, because we don't have that many sports halls. It was played in old warehouses where you just lay a floor and then you started playing. It's like a little bit like of an own kind of movement. Now, when it's a much more developed and established sport, it has unfortunately moved, the growth has moved into similarity to other sports. And of course, you first are a trend sport and then you become an ordinary sport, and then the growing is different. But for example, it's very easy to play. It's still a very, very popular school sport in a lot of countries. I think the Netherlands is a good example. About 4 million school people are playing floorball regularly in the schools. But still, field hockey is much more, is the big sport, and where those players go who wants to do a professional career. But I mean, IFF is presently working on strategy, trying to transform this and also look more about how to bring it more vividly into schools and build through that.
That was my next question. Has the IFF a development program in place for the less developed floorball nations?
Well, IFF runs a floorball development program, which is actually consists of education for coaches and referees, because coaches and referees are actually the ones who makes the difference when you want to develop the sport. You can do coaching for players, but I mean that takes so much longer because you can only coach as many players. And then we have actually built a school curriculum, which is about one semester of teaching with 54 different drills, explaining to the physical education teacher of what you should do and how you should do it, in order to then make it possible for the pupils to work around and learn things. So yes, we have it, but the problem is, of course, IFF is a quite small organization and we don't have the same resources as the big sports.
I understand that. You mentioned before that floorball is inexpensive, it's very entertaining, and it's easy to learn in comparison with some other sports. So why do you think that floorball hasn't yet become popular in more countries?
Well, of course, it's quite logical. There is less young people interested in sports. So to win large masses of new players means that you would need to conquer. One very big difference is money. Floorball in those countries have very little money. The players are paying for everything themselves. And the fact is that it's not like everybody would welcome a new sport, a new team sport with open arms, because first of all, the younger generations are smaller. We have less and less kids in the younger age groups. And then at the same time, there is the competition for athletes, especially on the top level, is becoming much, much more hard. And then the way people do sport has changed. It's much more like going into also a difference where you have parkour, you have skating, you have sports climbing, you have indoor surfing, etc. Things you can do on your own, which is not necessary anymore the competition. It's more that you have fun doing it. And there, of course, floorball is a good example. But then the question is that there is a lot of people, both in Finland, Sweden, and a lot of other countries, who play floorball on a recreational level, but they have no interest of moving into the competition level. And that, of course, is the challenge, how to look upon that. And here the idea is then to start building, as I said, from the schools and also building on recreational side of floorball, trying to get that to become more interesting for people to actually do sports with.
Two countries in which floorball is popular are Sweden and Finland. This has also reflected the results on the professional level. If we look at the World Cup winners the last couple of years, both women and men, it's almost exclusively these two countries that have won. Why do you think that this is, and when do you think that other countries will be able to catch up?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to remember that I've been a coach since the beginning of the 90s, so I have a quite clear view. The fact is that the sport, the dynamics of floorball is still developing. The game itself is developing. The development in the countries behind the top 4 or behind the top 12 are developing really, really fast. The problem is that the development speed in the top nations is still extremely fast. And the dynamics of floorball is moving really, really quickly. I mean, if I compare, I was coaching a certain age group for 10 years. And if I compare, like those who were born 96, if I compare those players and what they were able to learn, most of them in average, to, for example, players born now, 2003, the 2003 players were already like 3 or 4 years younger. They were technically, like in general, more advanced because the game speed develops so quickly. And the problem is that as long as the top countries keeps developing and driving the development, which of course the reason is the fight between Finland and Sweden on the field of play. So it actually has been, it's more been like chess. If you think about that, the development on the top level internationally has been that when Finland won in 2008 and 2010, first in Prague and then in Helsinki, in the World Championships, Sweden then developed the game, brought in totally new elements of how to break the Finnish defense. It took Finland 4 years to find out a way to counter that. And they tried first by playing more physically, then they tried to play faster by short passes, and then they combined these two and actually were able to beat Sweden in Latvia in 2016. It was pretty close already in Gothenburg in 2014. Based on that, then In 2018, Sweden tried, but wasn't really very close to beat Finland. So it's been more or less of a thing. And as long as this is driving the development of the game itself in these two countries, the other ones, it's like having a car where the third and fourth car can drive like 102 kilometers per hour. But it doesn't really help when the leading car is still driving the same speed. They are developing at the same speed. And then, of course, since they have an advantage from the start, it's going forward. So to answer your question, in the new strategy, the IFF, which hopefully will be approved in the General Assembly in December, the target is in 2032 to have had 8 countries playing the semifinals in the men's and women's adult double World Floorball Championships. But I mean, saying who will win, that is problematic. It's like you have to remember that in ice hockey since between the 50s and 1992, when Finland won their first ice hockey medal ever, there was only 4 countries winning medals in ice hockey. And floorball is in exactly the same situation. If you compare to ice hockey now, I think it's still only 8 countries who have ever won a medal in ice hockey world championships. So, and they play every year. We only play every second year with men and every second year with women. So, but hopefully the development will go. And I mean, it's getting closer. In Prague, it was actually 1 centimeter away that Sweden would not have been in the final. The Swiss had, with 39 seconds to go, the Swiss had a post shot. That would have gone in, then the world might look a little bit different.
So is Switzerland the next country, if you have to bet, to become the next champion outside of Sweden and Finland?
That I'm difficult to say, but at least they have the opportunity. The Czechs are probably in for a generation change. Then you have Slovakia, you have Norway, who could surprise. Latvia was really good in 2016, but didn't manage the stress of the home games and the expectation of the crowd. And for the first time ever playing in front of a crowd of 8,000, they got totally perplexed. But I would say, yes, most likely Norway, Slovakia would be the ones who are challenging the top 4, and then Switzerland and Czech Republic challenging Finland and Sweden.
You mentioned a crowd of 8,000 people. A few years ago, when the World Cup was held in Stockholm, Sweden, in the Ericsson Globe, it was a sellout. How important was this for the sport, and how important is it for you when you negotiate with sponsors and media?
Well, I would say when we played in Globen, it was, of course, a proof that the sport is a real international top sport. And it's very interesting that if we think about that, in average, there are about 80 global multi-sport events or bigger sport federation world championships every year. There has been, during the last 10 years, there's been a global index based on social engagement, based on media visibility, based on sportive factors, and then TV visibility and finance effect and impact on the city. And there, for example, the Men's World Floorball Championships has been ranked between 18 and 25, which means that it has beaten have had a higher score than about 15 Summer Olympic sports. So the top product is very, very high. And for example, the World Floorball Championships in 2018 in Prague with 185,000 spectators during the event and a really, really lot of TV. It is still very hard to sell the sport because in sports, most of the money goes to football. It is an industry where, of course, the return on investment is what the sponsors are looking for. And floorball doesn't have enough visibility to give those numbers that a big company would probably invest in it. On the other hand, a big company would probably get a fairly amount of visibility and could use the sport quite vastly for their own development, as we are pretty flexible towards what we can do and how to look upon it. But at the moment, still we are seeking for the first major non-sport related sponsor for IFF.
I read something very interesting lately, and it is that floorball will take part in the Asian Indoor and Martial Art Games.
Yes, it's not a very big thing, of course, in Europe, but in Asia, it's an enormous thing because that's the first real proof of this, that the sport has grown much stronger in Asia. There are, if I remember correctly, there are 21 sports on the program, then mainly team sports and martial arts sports played indoors. And for the first time, we have been on the program 3 times in the Southeast Asian Games, which are organized within the 11 countries in Southeast Asia. Now it's the whole of Asia, and it's organized by the Olympic Committee of Asia. And also in this case, it's the first time the sport will then be showcased to the whole Olympic movement in Asia, which of course will probably mean that Asia is the place where floorball is spreading the fastest and also growing. And maybe there, because in floorball is a sport where size is not that important. You think about certain players like Galante Karlström and other players who are not that big. Then you have the big towers, of course, also in the Swedish national team, but there are a lot of small players. Peter Kotilainen, for example, is not very big. And this would, of course, give a possibility also for the Asians to compete, like where size is not the most important factor. So this is a huge thing. And of course, we hope now that the coronavirus will not move or cancel the event from next spring in end of May when they are supposed to play.
Another initiative taken by the IFF is to sign the UN Sport for Climate Action Declaration.
Yes, we have. And of course, it's our responsibility to try to make our events and our operations as sustainable and viable as possible in order to help preserving the environment and the world as it is today and leave it for future generations to come. And we are working there on we have a project which was supposed to be launched now, but maybe might need to be delayed, is Stick With It, where we, during the World Floorball Championship, would collect old floorball material and then partly use them for development work, so to fix them, service them, and then send them forward to not so much developed countries and new floorball groups. And then the other parts of the material we would recycle to recycling plants and do things. We have also signed a contract now with a company called My Climate, who are helping us in then building sustainable programs. And for example, the World Floorball Championships organizers of 2022 in Zurich, Switzerland, is also then trying to make the event carbon neutral. So these are the things we are working in respect to sustainability. It's not only sustainability in the words of environment, but also we do quite a lot of work trying to develop also the transparency and good governance of IFF in order to be able to show that also for the sponsors that we are responsible and take care of not only our own organization but also the environment as a whole.
Have you seen a change from the sponsors after you took this initiative? Are they more eager now to sponsor your events?
Well, we have seen that the sponsorship has, before it was just visibility and maybe some ads in the venue. Now the sponsors, there needs to be more. There needs to be a real beef in the cooperation. And we believe, because in the World Championships here, we gather a lot of people which are otherwise hard to connect to. So we believe that we can give something to the sponsors there. But we also believe that in general, we've seen that the environment and good governance have become more and more important. And of course, the international sports world are facing with corruption and claims of corruption in a lot of sports organizations, makes it even more important to show that you are transparent. For example, we have everything, all decisions we make are transparently posted on our website. So you could go in and look, for example, of what I have said in the central board meeting, as we have discussion minutes from them. So we try to be in top of class there, and in the good governance reviews made by the Global Association of International Sports Federations, GIFs, we have been ranked of the non-Olympic federations by number 5, it's pretty good out of about 60 plus federations.
Definitely.
Of course, we could have been better, but we are working on it.
You can always do more, but I think that's a great start.
Yeah.
If we talk a little bit about you have an educational background in political science.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, I have in total 3 different university degrees. I have a bachelor in public administration. So I started with looking at governmental and municipal administration. Then I moved over to political science and official law on a more political science based. And then I actually became I started my first I worked for a few summers and a few years in the city of Helsinki administration, first as a finance auditor, and then also working a lot with youth there. And then I got a job at the university and the Finnish Science Academy, and was involved in a project doing voting behavioral analyze electoral behavior analysis of electoral changes in Finland, and actually I have a degree which is not that familiar anymore, but I'm a licentiate of political science, which is the in-between between a master's and a doctorate. And I was supposed to doctorate in political science, but then the recession of 1990s came and I had to move on. And I actually then worked 15 years in the corporate industry in the science field. I started as an analyst for the world's largest marketing research company, AC Nielsen, and then during the years advanced first to becoming a Nordic manager for modeling and analytics, which is in principle, we built models for our clients on how they could make more money in the fast-moving consumer goods market. And then I was, for the last 3 years there, in the modeling analytics business, I was a part of the European leadership team for that division of the AC Nielsen company. And then I moved on from that into the Nordic field for marketing and worked as a marketing director of AC Nielsen Nordic for the last year before I was then drafted over to IFF, where I have now been working a little bit over 15 years as the Secretary General. So quite a lot. And on the side, in between, I actually was also the CEO of the IFF World Floorball Championships organized in Finland in 2002. And then on a leave of absence from AC Nielsen, though doing some work for them at the same time. But that's in principle my career so far.
You have listed analytics as one of your strongest skills.
Yeah.
Was it at AC Nielsen that you developed these skills? And how has this helped you further along in your career?
Well, actually, analytics was probably the things I developed while I was working at the Science Academy and the University of Helsinki, because I was a researcher for that. But yes, I would say that analytics and capability of dealing with a large number of data at the same time and having then probably from there learn to elaborate with large data masses and doing things and maybe I can see and spot things which are. But I would say that organization, I think one of my other strong skills is all my organizational skills. I'm pretty good at having a lot of balls in the air at the same time. And that wouldn't happen on the field of play as a goalkeeper because there my teammates would usually say that it was more I was usually in front of the ball but didn't necessarily catch it all the times, but still made quite a good career for 18 years in playing, and I still actually play floorball in an old boys team in Finland. So, but no, I would say yes, political science and the education I got has helped me a lot. And it has especially given me the basis for then developing things and doing a lot of thinking. And probably the thing which comes from AC Nielsen is then the idea of seeking solutions for problems and trying to maybe look a little bit out of the box instead of trying. So usually when a problem occurs, it's the first 3 minutes, it's like, oh no, bloody awful and doesn't work at all. And then suddenly you start to mull through a different number of thoughts and maybe then come up with different solutions. Maybe not always that good, but at least trying to solve a situation from one way.
You mentioned that you're still playing floorball. It's actually a funny story of how you got into floorball in the first place.
Well, it is pretty funny. It was so that I was studying at the university and we had a football game. I was playing for one of the sororities, had their own football game, and we were playing. And in the intermission, the referee of the game, who happened to be the chairperson of the Finnish Floorball Federation at that time, I think this was 86 or 87. I can't actually remember. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was in mid-80s. And he came and asked me that, hey, that you are John, aren't you? Yes, I said, yes. And you are a goalie. You're an ice hockey goalie. I said, okay, I was injured a year ago and I have stopped playing ice hockey now. I got the puck in the face and for obvious reasons wasn't able to continue playing. And then he said that, yeah, would you like to come and play a floorball match on Saturday, which was 2 days later. I was said, floorball? What's that? Never heard of it. I mean, and then he said, yeah, but it's Sähly. Sähly is the name of what we played in beginning of the 80s in school. And then I continued playing in university, which is floorball without a goal into small goals, which you played with these Unihawk wobbly sticks, the red and green sticks going all the places, which you couldn't really do anything with. And I liked it a lot. And I had played ice hockey since I was 7 or 6 or 7, 5 actually probably. And I, as a goalie, and I liked it really a lot playing on the field of play. And I said, yeah, okay, I can come. And I then went to the hall, and in the hall I asked, okay, what game is this? And then I was told it's the Finnish national team against Helsinki All-Stars. And I was supposed to be the goalie of the Helsinki All-Stars because the goalie who was supposed to come there was injured. And I actually played the first floorball game, and now all floorball goalies will laugh their head off because I played it with bandy knee pads and on them football goalie trousers because I didn't have anything else and didn't really think of anything else. And I can tell you that wasn't the best gear to do that with because it was extremely hot. It was, you could glide around, that was okay, but my knees from the behind looked really bad. We led 2-1 after 2 periods, and then the national team coach at that time said that if the young boys will win, that then he would take us to play Sweden the next weekend in the national team. And then the national team then decided to beat us, and they won 3-2. But I was then asked to play in 4 of the present. Finland had 2 divisions at that time, had the league and then the first division. I was asked to play. And from there, then I first went to a team called Lemon, and then later next year moved over to Vuosaaren Vikingit, and then made a merge with SSV later, and then SSV made a merge with Erä Vikingit. And at the moment, the funny thing is that I actually started coaching in Erä, in that time, Tapalinnan Erä, and now I'm coaching again in Erä Vikingit. So the circle has, so to say, closed in that sense.
Indeed. So you have experiences as a player, coach, manager, together with higher education. If we focus on the educational part, how important would you say that education is in sports management, and which educational path would you advise people to take who wants to work in sports management?
Well, there is a difference, of course. If you work in sports management, there are, like in any business, it's either the managerial role kind of thing, where political science, administration, finances is very important. Another important part, and which more and more comes into the play, is of course law. And I have the advantage of having had an education which has had both finance, not on a very high level, but still. Then, of course, mathematics. I had a lot of administrational law into my studies, so I understand how the government works and how the social society works and that sector. But then, of course, I think very important is the thing which comes from international politics. If you want to be involved in international, like sports management and be part of international, you need to understand the way how it works and what the different cultures, how they think and from where it comes. And of course, understanding people, which I haven't studied that much, is of course one other thing which I think is quite key. But then the question is, what do you want to work with? There is a lot of possibilities inside sports management. And I have had the advantage, of course, working in a small organization, which then, of course, gives you the possibility, in this case, if you look at it from a positive point of view, gives you an opportunity to do a lot of things and be part of a lot of things, and probably also spent a lot of time developing that. But then I think one thing which I have actually got, not from education as such, like from when I was studying at university, but I've spent a lot of time on working and being a lecturer for both for the Finnish Floorball Federation and then the sports academy, a sports institute in Eerikkilä, which is now the Finnish football and Finnish floorball official training partner, development partner, training partner of the federations. I've been there working a lot of leadership and lecturing in leadership. And as a part of that process, I've in AC Nielsen, I learned a lot about different way of looking on for example, on group dynamics and looking on the sociograms of how groups are working, as we did a lot of that kind of research as well. And I think that has given me quite a good understanding of how the group dynamics works in different groups, and also giving the possibility of using it in both the positive and a negative way of trying to develop the group, but also trying then to be able to read what your opponent, so to say, in brackets, what your opponent is trying to achieve and how they are thinking about things. So yes, I would say education is really important. And it's also something which doesn't end when you get a degree, but if you are able to enhance the fact that you need to learn new things all the time. And with, I have noticed, for example, now with the development of social media, that there probably I'm 55 years old and I still can understand a lot of it, but I can't master it. And that's there. I wasn't too much involved with it when it's, so to say, started to come around and only did the things I had to do. But I follow and try to learn there.
Is there something that I haven't asked you that you would like to mention?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Then the final question. If you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who would you suggest?
I think you should interview Petteri Nykky, the head coach of the Finnish men's national team, who's also a golf pro and a golf coach. He has a very broad understanding and thinking about sports in general, and I think it could be quite interesting to see his way of managing. I would still say that if you think about what would be an advice for people who want to work in sports, I think it's very important to try. I know it's very difficult in the beginning, but to try to seek out persons you can discuss questions with, exchange views, and test what you do. And then it's important not to be afraid of asking questions and also putting up your hand to do things, even if you might not be totally able to do it, but then be brave enough to ask for help when you need it. I think that is a learning which I have learned, and that has helped me a lot.
I think that's great advice. Thank you so much for being on the Sports Management Podcast. I appreciate that you're taking the time, and I wish you all the best for the World Cup now in December.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Sports Management Podcast. Do you have thoughts or ideas about this podcast, or do you know someone that I should interview next? Please reach out to me on sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or visit my website sportsmanagementpodcast.com. If you prefer social media, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram @sportsmpodcast.